see if we're in. Okay, I think we've got everybody in now. So I really just want to say thank you so much to everyone for joining us today. We've really been really pleased with the response, had lots of registrations. So excited to have our first Bodypoint webinar. We're very pleased to have Kathleen Simpson from Bodypoint on Zoom with us today to run the session. This session's on pelvic positioning. Kathleen's been with Bodypoint for 18 years now and works in their international markets. She's worked with complex rehab experts across the globe and has a master's in clinical exercise physiology and has directed cardiac and pulmonary rehab programs. So we're in very good hands today. Before I do hand over to Kathleen, I just want to ask you all if you could please type your full name into the comments box, just so we have a record of who's here today, especially if you are sharing screens, because I know some of you are, just so we can then get an idea of absolutely everyone who's on. I also just wanted to let you all know that we will be sending out an email with a copy of today's presentation and links to all the videos that are going to be shown, as well as a recording. So just for your reference, if you do miss anything in the presentation, you don't need to worry, you'll be able to go back and watch it again. And we'll also have some time at the end for Q&A. So if you do have a question, if a question comes up during the presentation, feel free to either at the end we'll say about time for Q&A and you can ask it then if you want to just turn your mute off and ask it. Otherwise, you can just type it into the comments box at any time during the presentation and I'll just keep an eye on those and they can be answered at the end. If there is a question you just really want answered right then and there, you can also raise your hand virtually. So you should see a reactions button at the bottom of your screen. And if you click on that, you'll see raise hand. So if something you don't want to wait to the end, if you want it to get Kathleen to answer it while she's on that topic, feel free to do that. And then, of course, after the presentation, if it comes to you, you can always chat to your technical product specialist or one of our customer care team. And then finally, if you haven't registered for our second Bodypoint webinar next week, do make sure you do so. It's on Thursday, May 6th at the same time, 9:30, and it'll focus on anterior supports. So you can either go to the education section on our website, or you would have seen in a lot of our emails recently, as well as the follow-up email that you'll get. You'll get a link to the registration so you can make sure to register for that. And I think that's it from me. So I'll hand it over to you, Kathleen, now.
Well, thank you, Tanya. And thank you and welcome everyone for joining us today. I appreciate it. And I think we can share screen. Are we ready to do that, Tanya?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, do you see the presentation then?
Perfect. Yep, perfect.
Perfect. Well, now this is interesting. I'm so sorry, but my presentation is not there. I may have to not use my button, but use the roller here. So excuse me for any technical difficulties here. Well, Bodypoint, we make postural supports and secondary postural supports. And we don't make wheelchairs, and we don't make cushions, and we don't make backs. We really, really are focused on secondary postural supports. And this is going to drive me a little bit crazy that I am having trouble advancing the slides. So bear with me on that. The company is 28 years old, and we make harnesses and belts and ankle huggers and joysticks and joystick handles, and we make bath support products. They're Aeromesh bath support belts and calf straps and products to use for wheelchair sports and all kinds of mounting hardware. And if there are technicians here that are interested in the Bodypoint mounting hardware, there is a separate video presentation on just the Bodypoint hardware. And the reason for that is because Bodypoint makes well, we make equipment for people, for wheelchairs that are made all over the world. So we are located here in Seattle in the northwest corner of the United States. And we have to look way, way down here across the Pacific Ocean and over the equator to find you here in New Zealand. But we do have distributors in 50 countries now throughout the world. And my understanding is 2 more will be added soon. And as you can imagine, there's so many different kinds of wheelchairs all over the world. And to attach our products to all these different wheelchairs, we've had to become specialists in hardware as well. So there is another presentation for that. But today we're talking about pelvic positioning. And that's because when we're talking about secondary positioning, it all starts at the pelvis first. But with this caveat, we're going to assume everything we're talking about today, you already have the user in the right wheelchair, so it's the right size, it's not too wide, so they're not, they've got adequate lateral support. You have the right seat, the right back, the right angle, the seat to back angle. You have the right cushion. And all of these things, though these primary surfaces have been optimized for the user, and then still you need more support in positioning. And again, this starts with the pelvis. Next week we'll talk about anterior support, but pelvis is always first. Okay, I just thought I'd see if that's moving again, but it's not. I first want to distinguish, people think of postural support belts. I don't want them confused with seat belts. So we're all really familiar with seat belts. We get in our car every day, we put on the seat belt, we get on airplanes and there's a safety belt. And those really are safety belts. They're meant to mitigate risks. The car belt so that you don't, if you have to stop suddenly or you crash, you don't crash into the windshield. And in the case of the airplane, if they have big turbulence, you're not bouncing out of your seat and hitting the ceiling. But postural supports for wheelchairs are really designed to help position the wheelchair user, and also for comfort and for function, to help make better function, the wheelchair user more functional. So the pelvis is the base of support in the wheelchair. And essentially, we have the back of the spine, we have the front of the spine with the ASIS and the PSIS. We have a little subaceous notch here, and I'm pointing out some of these things because we'll be talking about them. We have the trochanter. The trochanter, for me, is, I think of it as the hinge point of your hip that allows you to move forward and back. And then, of course, the ischial tuberosity, which is the problem child for wheelchair sitting. What a belt can do, it's really essential for stability. Now, this child, he's able to reach forward and reach forward without collapsing and falling forward, because the belt is holding him secure so he can reach forward and play with the dominoes. It's also important for safety, comfort, but I think of it as more helping the wheelchair user be more functional and gain more independence. The human body is not well designed for sitting. I mean, we are designed to be bipedal animals and walk. And if we were designed for sitting, no one would have created this ischial tuberosity to stick out here and be problematic while sitting. And essentially, you look at this animal, and you can try to guess what this is. This animal, you see this really splayed ischial tuberosity. It's very well designed for sitting, as opposed to a human. And this is a baboon. And he can sit here all day. Not only that, he has these ischial callosities here, so he's got this rough surface. He's not going to get any pressure sores sitting all day. But we tend to get more surface for sitting by using the trochanteric shelf and using this bone in the leg to help give us even more stability. But notice, and I apologize if it's difficult to make this go forward, notice that when sitting and sitting with the trochanter sticking out, giving us more seating surface, notice that the ischial tuberosity is sticking down about 30 to 40 millimeters. So one of the things I do if we're in person and we're not, so I'll describe this instead. I have you get into a posterior pelvic tilt and just, you know, slide down in your chair, and then have someone next to you just try to push you over with your shoulder against your shoulder. And if you're in a posterior pelvic tilt, the person trying to push you finds it pretty easy to push you over. And then I also ask that you raise your hands up and have the other person try to push them down. And when you're in that posterior pelvic tilt, it's pretty easy to push your hands down, even if you're trying to resist. But if you sit upright and you're in a good postural position and not in posterior pelvic tilt, but in a neutral position, and they try to push you from the side, you're quite stable, really quite stable. And if they try to push your arms down when you're holding them up, you have a lot more resistance. It's much harder to do. Well, just that position has made you stronger and more functional in those respects. So Bodypoint belts, why Bodypoint? As I said, the only thing we do are postural supports. The president of our company sits on and he's an engineer as well, he sits on the International ISO Standards Committees. And there's also an ANSI-RESNA committee that is here in North America. But the ISO standards are worldwide, and our products are all tested to the ISO standards for postural supports. There's a new MDR standard in Europe, which doesn't apply to New Zealand, obviously, but I mention it only because it goes into effect at the end of this month, and this is a true regulation. And for postural supports, they're drawing on the ISO standards and recommendations to be part of the MDR regulation for Europe, and this is new. We design our products for maximum performance, and this is one of the ways we test to that performance. We also meet CE, again, that's a European standard. Our products you can wash up to 60 degrees Celsius, 140 degrees Fahrenheit, very, very hot. That's a requirement in many of the Nordic countries. We do meet the ISO standards, the 9001 standards for manufacturing. So our manufacturing facility has been certified by TUV. And there's a limited lifetime warranty on all Bodypoint products. But I want to focus a little bit on these standards to begin with to help you understand why we believe they're very important. This is I'll show you a test for the pelvic belts, and you see this little blue mark here. It's on this fixture. It's got the shape kind of a pelvis, and then you'll see in the video that forces are applied to, and it's 1,000 repetitions, and the force is specified given the size of the belt. But you can see how this is resisting and pulling and pulling and pulling against the belt. You can imagine one of your users that has very high tone and a lot of spasticity, they might be putting these kinds of forces and stresses on a belt. So why is that important? Well, what we're looking for is slippage. Now on the right, we have I think it's on the right. I don't know if this is your left or your right. I know sometimes you get mirrored images on Zoom. So this is my right anyway. This is the Bodypoint belt, and there's that original mark. Well, this slipped just 2 millimeters after the repetitive load. So it barely slipped at all. But if we take a look at this belt, this is, we'll call it brand X, you have nearly 26 millimeters of slippage here. And this will not pass the ISO standards. So what that means is that if somebody's pushing and pushing against that belt and it keeps slipping and slipping and slipping and getting looser and looser, then the belt is not doing its job. People will ask me, well, does it slip here at the buckle? Does it slip because of the webbing? Does it slip at the infitting? And the answer is it can be all of the above. And so we're testing our products to make sure that that slippage doesn't occur. And then the belts, we have this proprietary D-ring. It's a bigger font, I call it, of D. If you'll notice, the standard D-rings are about this size, but this one is bigger. It allows for a bigger hand, a bigger thumb to pull the webbing tight, the belt tight. We have proprietary buckles and patented buckles. Talk a little bit more about that. The webbing, even the webbing, it's a proprietary nylon. It's got a weave that's quite tight, so food doesn't get all in it and yucky. And yet it's pliable, but it's still stiff enough that it's easy to thread through the infittings. We have the Cordura edge binding. It doesn't wrinkle at all. This is very important because something that's next to your skin and tight, if you have wrinkles, that can be a potential for a pressure sore. And we have high performance foam that is distributing evenly. So you have the body, it envelops and makes it softer and more comfortable for the user. And the other thing about the Bodypoint G-ring, this is relatively new in the past couple of years, is this is sewn so that it stays just stiff. It doesn't, most D-rings, they'll slip. They could slip this way or that way. So someone with limited hand function, if they're trying to use this D-ring, it may have slipped behind and make it more difficult to utilize. So these D-rings are always in position. The belts that we are going to talk about today, we have a 2-point non-padded belt. This is a basic belt. We have 2-point padded belts, 4-point belts, and the Bodypoint EvaFlex, which is a belt with stiffened sides. The other thing about Bodypoint is these belts come in center pull, which is just sort of the standard belt, but we also have dual pull belts. So what this is used for is if you have a very cold climate, you're putting on heavy coats and you need twice as much room to expand, putting on and taking off clothing. You have even twice as much ability to tighten down the belt. And then the rear pull belt, what this means is it pulls from the rear. So to tighten it, you're going to pull it forward. And this I like to use with particularly with children and people who have obliquity and rotation to help get them more centered into the chair. Lots of belt options. And Bodypoint has designed their own buckles in most of these cases. This is the Bodypoint push button buckle, and most belts that you'll see for wheelchair users that are push button have an automotive buckle. And we used to buy the automotive buckles too. But we couldn't find one that could pass the ISO standards. So what we did was we'd get these buckles into our factory, and then we had to tweak them to make sure that we could get them so they would pass the ISO standards and not slip too much. And finally, Matthew decided decided that, well, why don't we just make our own? And so when we did, it's slimmer, it's sleeker. It doesn't have a great big receiver on this side that makes it bulkier. And it has certain pounds of pressure to open, so it's not too easy to open, but it's still easy enough for someone who might have more limited hand function. The plastic side release buckles, these are something that are not proprietary to Bodypoint. We do source these. These are used on the dual pull and the rear pull belts. You can also order any of our other belts with a plastic side release. They require, you know, they're difficult to open for someone with limited hand function, but they require that pincer function to open. Then we have the Bodypoint Rehab Latch. This is something you can open with the side of your hand, and that's designed for people with limited hand function. So we used to just buy the aircraft latch buckles and source those. That's pretty much what I see our competitors doing. The problem, there are a couple of problems with the aircraft latch buckle. When you're trying to open it, it will open at just 30 degrees. So what it means is you can just bump that and it might open up. And I think the idea is that for airline use, if the place was crashing or there was a fire, you had to get out of there quickly, they made it very easy to get out. But that can often be too easy for a wheelchair user. So this buckle opens and releases at 70 degrees. So it has to be a purposeful, you know, you have to be opening it and do that on purpose. It's also a very slim design. Again, it doesn't have a big receiver on this end, and it has this little loop, which you can put a little, well, I think I have another slide that shows this, a little loop that also help make it easier to open. I think about when I'm on a long trip, an overseas trip, I'm on the plane, you know, 7-8 hours, and that big clunky aircraft latch buckle, I always, if I'm going to sleep, you know, and I have my hands just laying comfortably in my lap, I have to cover that with a blanket, because otherwise I'll wake up and it's you know, pushing against my wrist or something. I mean, it's very uncomfortable. And I've often thought, well, imagine if I was a wheelchair user and I had that kind of buckle or that big a buckle in my lap all the time. It's annoying to me on a, you know, a 7-hour flight. I can imagine if you were wearing it all day that would not be very comfortable. We also have this swivel buckle, and again, there are other swivel buckles out there. This one, however, again, it'll pass the ISO standards test, and it requires more pounds of pressure to open this. I love this for children, particularly if you don't want the children getting out too easily. But caregivers can easily open this. It also swivels, just like it says. So for that wiggle worm child who's moving around, again, that allows them the freedom to have a little bit of movement, but they're still going to stay positioned quite well. Or for somebody with an asymmetrical posture, it has that swivel will have a little bit of ease to it, and so it's a buckle I like very, very much for that reason. We also have another small 1-inch push button buckle. Again, this is one that we source. Again, all these buckles pass the ISO standards. So this is showing the Bodypoint push button buckle, and it comes with different reduced access covers or security covers. And this makes it so it's more difficult to open. There are some places in the world that will not allow this buckle because it requires a pen or a pencil or a little tool to open it. And so we designed this reduced access cover. It's really interesting. The mechanism, it's truly not any harder to push as far as pounds of pressure. We don't change any of that, but just having less surface area to push. When you try both of them, I've had people say to me, no, you've changed something. This is just harder to push. And that's really not the case at all. Here's a little video to show you how easy it is to change these buckles. So this just shows the standard buckle, the D-ring pulling it tight, and opening it. Now, to open this, you just pull that 70 degrees and it slips. Now you're taking a little, there's a little slot there. Take that little metal tool to open it, pry it open, and then you can just simply put on the other cover. So this is the buckle security cover. Tighten that down, and then to open it, just using a pen to open. This is what I was mentioning with the rehab latch, how it's so slim and less weight on your lap, but it has these little pull loops, and they're sold separately, but you can see they can fit right in here to also help aid in opening, so it's easy to operate. The swivel buckle, as I said, pivots to equalize tension. In this video, we'll show some of this.
One of our buckle options is the swivel buckle. It is a strong and low-profile design. Because it is allowed to swivel and pivot, it equalizes the tension of the belt and doesn't bunch up, giving the user comfortable padded contact support. To fasten this buckle, take the two ends of the belt, line it up with the slot, and snap it together. You will hear an audible click. To release this buckle, push on the raised area of the center circle, then slide it forward to pull it apart. This particular buckle requires 12 pounds of force to release. It releases in either direction.
So it's pretty easy. Now this shows you how, this is my one fun video here. This shows you how it's difficult for kids to open because it requires more pounds of pressure.
Can't get it?
He says it's too tight.
Okay.
So that's one reason I like using those buckles for children. We also have this small push button buckle, and again the side release buckle as I've talked about. So if you're fitting and choosing a belt, what do we need to think about? And these are more the clinical needs of what we need to think about. There are basically three pelvic tendencies. You have anterior pelvic support, anterior pelvic tilt, where the PSIS is higher than the ASIS, so the posterior part of the spine is higher than the anterior part of the spine. We're always trying to achieve this neutral pelvis. This is sort of the ideal. Doesn't always happen. It's not always as easy as you'd hope. The most common pelvic tendency by far, probably about 92 to 93%, is this posterior pelvic tilt. And this is where the ASIS is higher than the PSIS. And essentially, if you're in posterior pelvic tilt and you slide it down, I mean, that's a great position to watch TV in and be comfortable. But if you're trying to push a wheelchair, if you want to avoid pressure sores, there's just many reasons for better respiration, for eating. I wouldn't want to be in posterior pelvic tilt and try to take a sip of water. I'd spill it all over me. I might choke. So what we want to achieve, if possible, is this neutral pelvis. Now, those are the main pelvic tendencies, and of course you can have obliquity, you can have rotation thrown in there too, but we're going to think about these tendencies first. And again, showing the pelvic tendencies. And then with the lateral and rotation and obliquity, where you have one hip higher than the other, and typically if you have this hip higher, then you're going to have the opposite shoulder higher as well. And so there's a lot going on here. Ideally, before you choose a belt, before you fit a belt, you've done an assessment on this client. and put them on a mat. And the question is, are these pelvic tendencies, are they fixed or are they flexible? And if they're flexible, then we can do a lot with the pelvic belts to help correct these tendencies, or keep somebody from developing a fixed pelvic tendency. So the truth is, if they're flexible, or if they're fixed, sometimes there's a little bit of flexibility in there. So, it's not always just, one or the other. Sometimes there's a little bit of give in there too. But typically, if somebody is fixed, then we're going to have to accommodate that pelvic tendency. Maybe we can help to correct it a bit. The goal might then be keeping it or preventing it from getting any worse. So this is a quick video on what to think about in trying to find the best angle for a belt.
How to find the position of a hip belt. Let your hands be your guide. How can you find the appropriate belt position for each unique individual? One way is to use your hands. First, experiment by gently applying pressure in different directions to the wheelchair user. Notice where on the pelvis you have placed your hands and how much pressure you have applied to achieve the desired position. By experimenting with your hands, you can identify where the padded surface of the belt should be placed on the body. Next, imagine lines extending from your arms. It will not only determine the angle of the belt, but also where to attach it to the wheelchair. For asymmetrical postures, the left and right sides of the belt may need to be adjusted independently of one another, just as you may use your hands to apply pressure in different ways. By following these simple guidelines, a positioning belt can replace your hands and help keep the individual in a good functional position.
So the best angle for posterior pelvic tilt, which again is going to be around 90% of your wheelchair users, is about anywhere from 70 degrees to 90 degrees roughly. This diagram is showing 60. The reason, okay, you want to be in front of the trochanter, which is about here on the hip. However, most wheelchairs, most manufacturers around the world, and I can attest to this because I've tried to fit a lot of belts on a lot of different chairs. They have a screw hole at 45 degrees, which is basically where the seat to back meet. And the problem with a 45-degree placement is that it's behind the trochanter. And if it's behind the trochanter, then it's going to limit motion, and I'll show you. Before I leave this slide though, this is showing a 0-degree belt angle. I would never ever recommend this. And the key reason for this is it's when it's tight, if it loosens up, then it's really not going to secure the pelvis at all. It's above the pelvis, and it can become a choking hazard. So there are cases of this in the world. You would not want to do that. Basically, I don't go beyond 45 degrees, and I only do that for anterior pelvic tilt. But let's look at this. I think we went by. So here's your typical black belt at a 45-degree angle at the, and this is where the screw hole is. And here you have it across. It's behind the trochanter, and that means the belt is usually pushing at the bottom of the bladder, the bottom of your stomach, and it's really not comfortable. And for belts to work, for belts, positioning belts to do their job, They really need to be tight. So what happens? People start loosening them up just to be more comfortable. They start sliding into posterior pelvic tilt, and obviously this is not the position we're trying to achieve. The other thing is that there is no way to get any kind of pressure relief at 45 degrees. You can't lean forward. It's your pelvis is locked down right here where the ITs are. So what we recommend, and again, I'm sorry I'm having trouble with this, getting the slides to go forward. What we recommend is something in front of the trochanter. So usually around 70 degrees up to about 90 degrees. Sometimes it depends on the chair, sometimes it depends on the individual. But what's important is it's in front of the trochanter, and what does that mean? Well, that means then it is possible to lean forward and offload the ITs. Now, essentially a wheelchair user should be doing that 2 or 3 times an hour is typically what we tell them. But if you make it difficult for them to do that, they're not going to. I think so often I'll see a wheelchair user and they might be leaning way forward, and I think, oh, they're so interested in what I'm saying, but indeed they're probably just offloading their ITs and trying to get that exercise in through the day. So the other thing is that if you remember the child at the beginning of the presentation, the child who was leaning forward, well, it makes you more functional. You can get something off a table, you can lean forward and open a door handle. So it gives you more functional reach, as well as allowing this possibility of offloading the ITs. And it's more comfortable because if a belt is tight, it's pressing on the top of the thighs, and that's more comfortable than having pressure against your bladder. I'm so sorry that this is a problem. So you see the ITs offloaded here. And I'm going to see if I put this on a different, there. Sometimes you can have some slippage with the belt if there's too much force, spasticity. If there's too much slippage, you can also use a 4-point belt. And in Bodypoint belts, essentially this secondary strap is intended to keep this primary strap in place. So this primary strap is holding the person, keeping them from being in a posterior pelvic tilt, keeping them from shifting out of the chair, shifting out of that position if they have a lot of spasticity. And this secondary strap, the only purpose for it is to keep this primary strap in place, and it works quite well. And essentially, if you have this 4-point belt with a secondary strap back at around 40 degrees, 45 degrees or so, it still allows for you to offload, for the user to offload the ITs, which is important, yet it'll hold the primary strap in place. For anterior support, this is the one time that we do recommend 45 degrees. And the reason is, I'm trying to get this to, anyway, sorry, I'm trying to use the mouse, but then make it advance the slide. And it takes different surfaces to do these things, I'm learning. But anyway, the primary strap with Bodypoint products, for an anterior support, or for an anterior pelvic tilt, would be mounted at 45 degrees, and this is behind the trochanter. The main thing is with anterior support, it's often usually a lordotic posture. So you have a big exaggerated curve in the lordosis here and in the lumbar area here, and what you're trying to do is pull this pelvis back. And that's the reason for this. Now, what you don't want is for the belt to hike up if it starts to get loose. So Then the secondary strap goes in front of it to keep this belt from hiking up. The best placement, as we talked about, for posterior pelvic tilt, this slide just illustrates it here at about 70 degrees, as opposed to anterior support, which anterior pelvic tilt. Now this is Natalie, and she does have lordosis, and she has a lot of spasticity as well. And so you notice that the primary belt is here at 45 degrees and that the secondary strap is in front. Now, Natalie requires a caregiver at all times. So when she needs to be repositioned and offload and give some pressure relief to her ITs, she has a caregiver that is helping to do that. Bodypoint 4-point belts are different from some companies, and what's interesting about that is that there is a D-ring right underneath here, and it means that the strap can go either direction. So you notice that the secondary strap for posterior pelvic tilt went behind, but for anterior tilt went in front, and this is how you can control some of this. Sometimes you have someone with obliquity or rotation, and you might have an asymmetrical belt angle, and you might have the secondary straps, one going in front if indeed the belt is at 45 degrees with a hip that is that has obliquity and is higher on one side, and you're trying to pull that down. But the other side may be at 70 degrees, and then the secondary strap may go the other direction. So that's the reason for this design. And this is showing you that D-ring that allows that secondary strap to go either way. Now, that's opposed to some other manufacturers have 4-point belts that are like this. And basically they're designed, they're going right across the bladder. They're going to make it, it's not possible to ever offload the ITs that way if you're in posterior pelvic tilt. And they're really not designed to be at a 70 or 90 degree angle. They're really designed for 45 degree angle. And this is just a testament from a wheelchair user in Germany. And it was interesting because he sent this to us out of the blue. And it was interesting to me that he understood the positioning part of it, but he had better transmission of his arms and wheels, so he could push his chair better, and he didn't have a risk of falling out of the chair. But I like that he became he got clever, and he attached a bag on a lap, and that's the only time I've seen that. And again, with asymmetrical mountings, if I see a user with an asymmetrical posture, I'm immediately going to think that the belt most likely should be placed asymmetrically. And if you remember in that little video clip, if we have this user, this wheelchair user who got on the mat and we found out the wheelchair user is flexible, this obliquity is flexible. Then if you take the belt on the side that is higher with that obliquity and put it 45 degrees and really try to pull that hip down and place the belt here at 70 degrees. Again, as I say, if I have a user who's flexible and yet they exhibit an asymmetric posture, then getting them in the chair, taking your hands and seeing if you can, where you can place your hands to get the most neutral pelvic position you can, that's where you want to place the belt, in the same places where you're going to put your hands. If the user has a fixed obliquity and rotation, then essentially the belt might be at the same position, but you may be just accommodating that obliquity and keep it from getting any worse, but you may not be able to pull that hip all the way down. Now, how do we size a belt? And Bodypoint has kind of a unique way of sizing. Let me show you this.
First, determine the correct position and angle for the belt, as shown in another video. Then, use a flexible tape to measure the total padded length of the belt. This user measures 50 centimeters. Using our part numbers, select the belt that matches best. Here, the closest is our size M46, which has 46 centimeters of padding. If the user is in between sizes, consider the body shape, climate, and any weight fluctuations. Here, if we sized up to the L62 with 2-inch webbing, you'll see that it is too large for the user's body shape. The webbing, buckle size, and padded length will always be in scale to each other, so most of the time the padded length closest to your measurement will be best.
So we have charts. You can go to bodypoint.com. We have brochures as well and catalogs that show how to choose the belt. But essentially, this padded length is the length in centimeters. If you see an S, that stands for small, and 32, that's 32 centimeters. If it's S38, that's 38 centimeters. That means that's the padded width here. If it's M for medium and 36 centimeters, again, that's the padded width, or an M46 or an L62, or we get into our bariatric belts, again, L with 82 centimeters or 92 centimeters. So we have a lot of variation in belt sizing. We have a part numbering system, HB standing for hip belt, 2 is 2-point versus 4 being 4-point. The 5 is referring to this push button. The 0 is the center pole. It makes sense to us Bodypoint people, but there's a reason for these part numbers. Then you have the sizing, which is the M, and then the 46 centimeters of pad length. If you have a medium, then the webbing is 1 1/2 inches. If you have, and if you have a small, it's 1 inch or 25 millimeters. If you have a large, this webbing width is 50 millimeters. We also have something called the subasis pad. And this works with a series of belts that we have both in 2-point and 4-point that have Velcro compatible lining in the back of the belt. And it was originally designed for somebody, it's very useful for somebody with rotation and obliquity as well. And these teardrop shaped pads, they're filled with a center gel. So they're kind of squishy, but not too squishy. And then they have Velcro on the back. So they can just fit into the inside of the belt. And again, for an anterior obliquity or rotation, Natalie, that picture that I showed you of her, she has a subasis pad really pulling on one side where she has that hip much higher than the other, and this fits right in that subasis notch and pulls against it. So it's helping to control that obliquity, keep it from getting worse, but not cause any kinds of pressure sores. Now, the pads can be used in a couple of different ways. So again, as I say, what you're trying to do is pull this back into a more neutral pelvis here. And this is showing the use of the subaces pad in that subaces notch. So right up in here, it's an excellent tool for trying to correct or even accommodate the obliquity and keep it from getting worse. Now, I more commonly use it, however, in posterior pelvic tilt with obliquity and rotation. And essentially, that would be mounted here. And so the edge of the belt, so not at the substernal notch, and essentially I put it at the end of the pad, and that's right at the side, and that helps to keep the belt very, very snug. If you take someone like Jordan here, that belt is put in right, that subaces pad is put in right at the edge of the belt, and it really helps hold him securely. He has a lot of tone, very high tone. He's also using the Bodypoint EvaFlex, and this is my favorite belt that we make. It has stiffened ends so that it stands upright when it opens. And what that means is when you open the belt, it doesn't fall to the floor into the wheel wells. It doesn't, get dirty on the ground. And then when you get the client back in the chair and then you're searching for the belt and it's on the ground, the client's moving, and it's so much easier because it can just push off to the side, but it's right there when you need it, and it stays clean. Originally, we designed this for sports users, but we now find that users of in all kinds of chairs and with all kinds of pelvic tendencies use the EvaFlex very successfully. It attaches quite easly in a power chair, power chairs that have slotted seat rails. Not all of them do, but many of them do now. And essentially, what I like about that is you can get the belt quite close to the user this way, and then this stiffened part of the belt is attaching here. I'm going to go. Here's a case. This is Larry. When we met Larry, he was 42 years old, and his therapist told me that he has cerebral palsy. He has a lot of spasticity, and you will see the extreme amount of spasticity that he has. So he is always at risk for falling out of his chair, and that means he's got to have a belt, obviously for safety and for positioning. The problem is Larry really hates belts, and he's always hated belts. He's quite thin. I don't know if when belts are tight if they've been really comfortable for him. But the problem was, he had to be repositioned hourly, and his therapist wanted to get him into a power chair because his primary caregiver was his father, who was 82 years old, and he was just getting to the point where he could no longer push Larry around in his manual chair. But the only reason they hadn't put him in a power chair before that is because of this risk of getting out of the chair and not being safe. So she asked me, she saw this EvaFlex at a trade show, and she said, would this work for Larry? Now, at that time, this was brand new. We had designed it for sports use, basketball chairs, but I said, I don't know, but we can try it. So essentially, this is what we did. This was Larry's manual chair at the time. You can see they had used some laterals, how they had used this contour cushion, everything they could think of to try to keep Larry in the chair. And we mounted the EvaFlex. You can see that the EvaFlex, curves up right here. And then I don't even know what kind of, this is a very old chair. I don't know what kind of chair this is, but it had lots of holes, so it was really easy to get the belt mounted at the correct place for Larry. I wish all chairs were that easy to mount belts. And now here's Larry in the belt. What it doesn't show here is we put in a subasis pad to also fit in there, so that he's so slim that it just nudges the belt even that tighter on Larry, but it's still very comfortable for him. So then he used the chair for a month and came back, and what they found is they had decreased his repositioning need. He only needed to be repositioned every 3 to 4 hours, more like 4 hours. So that had decreased that need by 75%. And his therapist said, okay, it's now safe for Larry to be in a power chair. And they ordered his power chair, which was nice to see. But if you notice there, he's wearing a University of Washington Huskies sweatshirt. That's a university here in Seattle, and it's my alma mater. And I was at a football game, a Husky football game, and I was with my mother-in-law at the time, and she was quite elderly, so we were using the elevator because she couldn't really go up the stairs. And who do I run into but Larry and his father? And it was just so nice to see, because his father could not have pushed him around that big stadium. And this way, Larry's in the power chair and they could go enjoy the football game together. So it's a very happy ending. And quite frankly, if the EvaFlex works well on Larry with his amount of spasticity, this is somebody I would have put in a 4-point belt, and a 4-point belt would have worked. But Larry likes the EvaFlex much better. It's easier tolerated by him. It's easier for his caregivers to get him in and out and not have to search for the belt on the ground. So he's pretty happy about it. And this shows you the inside of an EvaFlex with the Velcro compatible lining, and where you can stick your subasis pads, so that it works very nicely with this product. But we do have 2-point and 4-point belts. Not all of them. You have to look for the right belt. But we do have some that have the Velcro compatible lining, and so it's possible to do this also with those belts. The EvaFlex includes these low profile fasteners, and there's several ways to mount it. You notice on this manual chair that has sling upholstery, you can attach it with this 90-degree bracket using the upholstery screws. Here on this chair with a tubular frame, we use the band clamps. These are stainless steel band clamps. They come in 6 or 7 different sizes for different diameters of tubing. You could even, if they have a side guard in an active chair, you can even attach it by drilling through the side guard. And again, this is showing the attachment. We have T-slots or bolts that can fit into the head, fits into the slotted frame, and then you can attach the EvaFlex that way. We have a new EvaFlex belt extender. We found after we came out with the EvaFlex, cushions were getting thicker and thicker and thicker, and we found that we needed to have this extender. The reason is we couldn't just make the EvaFlex longer, because then it wouldn't maintain its stand-up properties. So the belt extender does that. And frankly, there's a video here that explains this the best, so I'll play that.
I'd like to show you EvaFlex belt extender. For the fitting of any belt, you start by determining the best place where you want to apply the pads and the direction that you want the belt to tension in. In this case, I'm imagining I want the belt over my thighs and pulling backwards behind my hips at about 70 degrees. So following that angle, measure across the soft tissue on my thighs, and I'm finding that about a 46 centimeter belt is going to be an appropriate fit. So I've got that belt, and as you can see, the end of it is too short to reach any appropriate mounting place on the chair. However, we have a new solution, the EvaFlex belt extender. That will allow me to reach a mounting hole. So, knowing that I want to mount in this position, I would normally mark the frame of the chair with a piece of tape, and then measure the distance from the tape to the backrest. It's about 8 centimeters. So that's the location where I want to mount. For the purposes of the video, I've already mounted a band clamp in that position. Now I'll show you how to do the installation. The EvaFlex belt extender joins to the end of the EvaFlex using a screw in the last hole. The extender has a pin which fits into the last hole of the EvaFlex or any other hole according to the length that you want. In the back side, you place a low profile flange nut, which is included with the extender. And through the upper hole, you run an M6 truss head screw. Lock it down. With that done, you've just extended the length of the belt and preserved all of the stiffness. So now I can mount the EvaFlex using the extender to the band clamp. I'm going to do that with a spring washer, a low profile flange nut, and the M6 button head screw, which comes with the band clamp. Tighten down, as you can see, the EvaFlex stands up. I can use the belt, and the belt can be pivoted through a small range. If I don't want it to run into this gusset on the back, I could cut off the end of the plastic using a bandsaw and then sand the end to profile. I've done that on the other side of the chair. So as you can see here, with the end cut off, it's able to pivot further. However, imagine that you're running into obstacles. I've added a bolt here for that purpose, and that you're not able to pivot the belt down to the side. So side transfers from the chair are going to be difficult. What I've done to solve that problem is to install the belt extender facing the other direction so that the pin is not fitting into a hole in the EvaFlex, but facing away from it. That allows the EvaFlex to pivot from a second point, so that now it can swing out of the way for side transfers. It can swing backwards to clear the entire seating surface, and in use, it can still hold all of the tension of the belt.
So the EvaFlex has received awards and Best Pick and from different some North American magazines and things, but it is a very popular belt, and it's certainly my favorite. Again, we designed it originally for sports use, and it's the whole idea, as you all know, if you've worked with these wheelchair athletes, they want to get strapped down so tight. They want to be at one with their chair. And the reason is they can then manipulate the chair a whole lot better. And it's really interesting. Then these users go and get in their active chair and they say, well, you know, I don't want a belt. And this is an interesting comment from Josh Dewick. He's a Canadian Paralympic gold medalist monoskier. And well, listen to what he says about the EvaFlex. Oops. Well, let's see if, there we go.
one of the Bodypoint products that I'm most excited about is this new lap belt that I got going on here, which is really just a simple addition to my wheelchair that I just kind of cross over like this. The number of things that it helps me to do better in my everyday life is unbelievable. So from just literally pushing, I feel like my shoulders were designed to be shoulders and not legs. So I've probably got a certain number of pushes in me over a lifetime, maybe a few million pushes before my shoulders start to give out. You know, when I'm 60 or 70 years old, there's going to be a point where my shoulders are like, man, you know, you're meant to use your legs, not your arms. Right away, the efficiency in the pushing that I have right now, I think will give me more of a lifespan with my arms. When I first put this belt on, I was super reluctant. I've been in the chair for 10 years, and the last thing I want to do is put a seat belt on my wheelchair. I thought they were stupid. I thought it would restrict my freedom and be a restraint. But the reality is, it gives me way more freedom in my chair. I don't feel like I'm sitting on my wheelchair anymore. I feel like it's a part of who I am. Bodypoint helps to create a connection between the person and the equipment. And if you have that intimate connection, then you can do anything. You can transcend the disability.
And this is why I really try to urge active wheelchair users to consider the EvaFlex. And every time I've done that, they've been really happy. And Julie is an interesting active wheelchair user. She's an occupational therapist, and so she's got a lot of function. And down to Luke, who really needs a lot of control. He has a lot of spasticity. So the EvaFlex can be used for all kinds of wheelchair users. We have a whole matrix in our product guide that explains all these different kinds of belts that we've been talking about, whether they're center pull, dual pull, rear pull, if you need push button, you need side release, whatever size you need. And then it gives the part numbers, so it makes it possible to order these belts. And I thought I had just discovered an easier way to forward this, but maybe not. We have one more thing I'd like to show you, and that is our leg harness. And this is for, I like to call them our Houdinis, who will get out of the chair no matter what. And essentially, it wraps around the leg. I like to think of it as almost like a parachute harness, so that when extension takes place, it cinches down. And I know I was asked one time, a young woman who had epilepsy. Most of the time she didn't need a positioning belt for positioning, but when she had a seizure, 2 different times she had fallen out, and she had a belt on one of the times, but even her spastic movements somehow managed to open the buckle of the belt, and she fell and hurt herself. So this is essentially how you put a belt harness on. It's going underneath the thigh. The front part of it comes as far forward on the chair really as you can get, is what I typically do, and then put the back in as far back as it will go. Then this is a little video, and it'll demonstrate how it works if someone goes into an extension. This is Alan Siekman, who came to New Zealand for Bodypoint probably 10 years ago or so, and did a nice roadshow there. And his wife, who's an OT, she is demonstrating what happens when someone goes into extension with a leg harness on. Alan's going to mount the leg harness, or put it on her. And then just to sort of show this process of going into extension, and see how the leg harness doesn't move a whole lot, but when she engages it, it's, as I say, like a parachute harness. She's only going to go so far and not any further. So for the woman I was telling you about with that had epilepsy, it worked really well for her. I know I know that Philippe Montfort Korea, who is our Bodypoint area manager for Latin America and for Southern Europe, he does a lot of work with children. He uses these leg harnesses all the time with children, and with children with a lot of spasticity and then also needing more positioning, he will sometimes use a belt and a leg harness. So there's just another little tool from Bodypoint for users, because as we know, they aren't all the same. So the main thing we want to think about is that these postural belts, they're, as Josh said, they're not restraints. If they're applied properly, if you have the right belt on and attached to the chair properly, it should allow more function and more freedom, and rather than be a restraint. And whether that means being secure, this is one of the things, his legs tend to splay way out, so he likes to use the EvaFlex way down on his chair to help keep his legs together more. He gets a better push strength when he does that. And again, the use in a sports chair, you see, here's a basketball user who uses 2 of the belts. I mean, they just want to be glued to their chairs, so they have more function and more ability to move with their chair. So that is essentially our my presentation. And if you need any more resources, you can go to Bodypoint, www.bodypoint.com. You'll find all kinds of, on our YouTube channel, which you can find there, you'll find all kinds of videos and presentations and webinars. And I'm going to be here again next week to talk about anterior supports. But I think, Tanya, are there any questions?
I have a couple of questions. Thank you so much, Kathleen. That was amazing. I just have a couple. One was just someone just wanted to clarify which pull style you recommended for children. Was it dual or rear? I think it was rear, was it? That you personally liked using for children?
I like using the swivel buckle for children.
Okay.
And as far as pull style,
yeah.
If you have kids that need to get pushed back, particularly with some obliquity and need to get pushed back, I like the rear pull, because you can take the child and you're getting them into the chair, and then that pull, you can be pushing with one hand, pulling with the other hand, and pushing their pelvis back into the chair, and then get the other side, push that side back, and then pull from the rear, but you're pulling it forward. It's called rear pull, to get that pelvis really back and really engaged into the chair. Okay,
thank you. Just the other one was just, I don't know if you'll be able to answer this, or possibly one of our technical product specialists can. Someone's just said leg harness like the Rifton activity chair. Do we have this in New Zealand? I don't know that one, so I don't know if any of our technical product specialists are on and can help. Otherwise, do you know the Rifton activity chair, Kathleen?
I know a lot of the Rifton chairs. I'm not familiar with the activity chair. I know that Rifton has looked at a lot of our products and using a leg harness with some children, and if it's an activity chair, that might be a good and appropriate use of a leg harness. Okay. But I'll go look at it and see if I can't get you an answer. I'll get online and see what I can see. With the
hold on, they've just sent another message just to clarify, saying, are we able to get the Bodypoint leg harness in New Zealand? So yes, I'll get one of our technical product specialists to reach out to you, the assessor who's asking, and we can find some information on that for you. I think that's everything. So thank you very much, Kathleen. And yeah, just everyone, if you haven't registered for next Thursday's webinar, which is at the same time, make sure you do. And keep an eye on your inbox. You'll get an email with the recording of today's session and all the information in there. Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much.
I hope next time I can be there in person.
Yeah, yeah, hopefully in the not too distant future.
Indeed.
Okay, have a great afternoon, Kathleen.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.